Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've been working diligently with staff from Finance and the Manager's Office and Public Works over the last several months to make a recommendation to the council as to how to expend our share of the American Rescue Plan funding. So this presentation will be a preliminary introduction to it. And Murray. And then the council will have time to consider it. It doesn't have to be cast in stone. We are still awaiting the federal government to adopt some final rules that they're promulgating for the final expenditure of these funds, but I think we're within the lines. We have been working with Congressman Courtney's office. We've been attending state and CROG meetings to give some guidance. We've been reviewing, and I've sent you plans of other communities in regard to how they're going to expend the funds. So I'll briefly give you the overview, and then as each phase, if you want to make changes, we can do that at subsequent meetings, probably after November, to let the new council ultimately decide. And then as each piece comes forward under the time frame, it will be explained again, refined, and then it will be expended from the monies that we've received. So next slide. This is just basically the criteria for eligible use of funding to support public health expenditures, address negative economic impacts from the emergency, replace public sector revenue, provide premium pay for essential employees, invest in water and sewer infrastructure, and investing in broadband infrastructure. Those are the areas that the government says you can expend these funds. Next slide. What we will be receiving is just shy of $13 million, $12,920,090. In June, we received the first half of our tranche of 50%, which is almost $6.5 million. So we have that in the bank in a separate fund, so designated. And the remainder of the fund should be received in 2022. The deadlines. The town has until December 31st of 2024 to encumber or obligate the funds. That's why we're making the presentation. So ultimately, that would be the blueprint to say this is how we want to spend them. And then we would have until December 31st, 2026 to actually make the expenditures. Next slide. These are what we've designated. We were, and the council was very insightful in leasing with an option to buy the Enfield Express. It has been a huge success, 2 buildings over at 820 Enfield Street for drive-through town services. We've used it for dog licenses, taxes, and then ultimately as part of the building consolidation plan, we put over there the tax department and assessor's department. It's been very successful. And then because we had the space, council also created the police hub where you've designated 4 resident officers. And we did that because it's adjacent to the future Higgin Park, which we've already started to implement this summer. It has 1.7 acres of land adjacent to Town Hall, so we can double the parking. We need it. If you've come to the Enfield Market on the weekends and seen the increased use due to the playscape, this parking will be much appreciated. The cost, we believe, we negotiated a good deal with the owners. They're anxious to sell it to us, and we're getting credit now for the payments for rent. So the cost of that would be $725,000, which we are eligible to expend from these funds. So that's one recommendation. Next, as I said, we've already encumbered and started to implement the Higgins Park. We put in the playscape this summer. You've also funded the 2 walking trails, 1/3 and 1/4 of a mile, plus an outdoor basketball court. Those are all funded already, and those are underway and will be completed by the end of this, hopefully the fall and the beginning of the spring. We're also adjacent to the St. Adalbert's indoor basketball and sport facility that you've already funded as well. That'll be on our agenda in October to sign the lease and to actually purchase it and make the improvements. But what we did here, these 3 items, we've also, and I like to have contingencies. We pay as we go. We did some things out of the budget. We did some things in the budget, and we're expending some money from the ARA funds. What we have here is parking for the Higgins Park, which is behind the Express, which I just talked about, $425,000. The fitness stations at the already funded walkways, and then a band shell, which would be in the Higgins Park. I will tell you, we've put those in the recreation referendum. they are there. But if the voters were to decide not to go forward on the splash pads and the pool, you would still have this money available to complete those portions of the park. And I think it's reasonable. We wouldn't be spending the millions on the pool and the splash pad, but it would do these amenities, which I think were part of the plan that council wanted to see implemented. So I'm giving us a safeguard here. If it's passed at referendum, it would free up this money for other purposes that you could decide at a later date. Next slide. These are the new proposals that we're making. Pickleball lights, it's been hugely successful out there at the pickleball courts, which you've already restored and improved. There's been a request and a petition for lighting, so Public Works costed it out. That would be $57.5. The next one is field improvements. As you know, we've had people come before us from soccer and Little League and girls softball. The council has made some great investments. I will tell you 3 of which are: one, the new girls softball field to replace what we took away behind Town Hall here for Higgins Park. That will be constructed in the spring. That was almost $750,000. We also, at Powder Hollow for boys baseball and their use, we funded improvements of $750,000. And we've also, as you saw at the last meeting, authorized funding of almost $1 million for a new turf field and a track at the high school. So those are all bought and basically paid for. What we'd like to do, because we do have a significant need for other fields in the town, we'd like to appropriate $1.5 million for the general use of fields for all of our sporting programs. And if you look at the bottom here, I've included a picture at the high school. We've entered into talks with Chris Drezik, the superintendent, Public Works, myself and Kasha, and Finance. We've been meeting. We've now started a new focus group. We'll be meeting again Thursday. As you can see in the bottom picture, you see the turf field to the left, which is the focus of the $1 million for the track and the field. What we've discovered, however, is the other 4 fields that you see there are primarily unable to be used, and Bob's nodding his head. That's why the boys' baseball has to go out to Powder Hollow. It floods. The drainage is inadequate. So here we have this beautiful multi-million-dollar best high school in the state for internal use, and we have probably some of the shoddiest sports fields in the state. It's something that I think we could address. What we now realize is, and the superintendent said, before we spend the $1 million we've already appropriated on the fields, why don't we look at the whole complex? So we've put in an additional $1.5 million. He is going to up the ante as well to match. And what we're looking at, so that you know we'll be coming forward, we'd like to fix the drainage. Those 4 fields could perhaps be 4 or more. We'd like to do them in turf. They'd be able to be used for all the different sports in town. And also, there are old trailers out there. We have an inadequate media box. We don't have bleachers for home games. We saw the other night we had a little trouble over there because sometimes oil and vinegar. This would address that. There would be a grand entranceway that there was actually a architectural conception done a few years ago for this, where you'd come in, it would be a beautiful grand entrance, there'd be locker rooms, there'd be other facilities. So we're saying, let's get the most for our money. As the superintendent says, we're not going to see money like this again in our lifetime. Let's invest it appropriately. And I think this high school and our residents, our students and our athletes deserve it. We're working on that, but this is $1.5 million designated. We'll come forward with a plan for you, but I think it's going to be quite incredible what we can do there with our existing space. It really will be a sports complex that we can be as proud of as we are of the high school and the presentation we just saw that we're going to be on the JFK. We've included a $100,000 payment towards this bike path design. This is the one we've received a $925,000 state grant for through Thompsonville, connecting to Windsor Locks and Suffield. Our share for design is $100,000, so we said, why don't we put it towards that? It's 10% of the $1 million, and I think it's an appropriate use as well. The next slide, as Gina reminds me, you can never have enough outdoor bathrooms. So what we've done, since we're doing the improvements at these other parks, we now would like to include bathroom facilities at Brainerd Park for $378,000, Powder Hollow Park for the same amount, $378,000. Higgins Park restroom and locker room. We've included in the referendum bathrooms for the new pool area, but again, should that not pass, I think we would like to have the bathrooms. As you know, we have the Enfield Market, we have porta potties, they're unsightly. I think sometimes they're not sanitary, and so I think the park alone would benefit from that, so we've included it here as well. If it's passed on the referendum, then again, you would have that money freed up for other purposes. Town Hall is a very well-used building. The bathrooms are antiquated. We constantly get complaints needing of repairs. It is your town hall. We've done a nice job of redressing, I think, the council chambers, doing the new media room downstairs, and I think it's appropriate when we have guests that the bathrooms, we shouldn't be embarrassed. So we've included that as well. We've looked at what other towns have done, and basically this is an appropriate use of it. It's to support small businesses that have been impacted by COVID over the last couple of years. This isn't a magic number. It wasn't scientifically arrived at. We've kind of looked at what other towns have funded, and given our size, this would be a $400,000 fund. We would anticipate that Nelson Teresio and Community Development would oversee it. We have criteria for it, but basically it would be for your final approval when you talk about it and look at it. We're thinking about one-time grants to small businesses with under 50 employees who haven't received other large amounts of federal aid. That would be in the application process, and they could receive a one-time grant of $5,000 to $10,000. So you would be able to help quite a few small businesses in town, and that's something that we're recommending as well under the use of the ARA. As you know, you purchased the 7 acres adjacent to the existing public safety complex so that we could propose a regional public safety complex for housing our EMS, a police department, and a regional facility for training. We were fortunate enough to have the governor include that in his bonding bill this past winter. We've carefully articulated, with help of the bond council, the question for the public safety complex. The total cost of the complex is going to be $15.1 million. We hope to receive $12.8 million under the Public Act and the governor's bond bill, and then the balance would be $2.3 million, which John, and we've assessed for the regional portion of this, would be eligible to use the funds. Therefore, there would be no taxpayer dollars from Enfield expended on this project. And our question was very clear. If you read it, that we passed the other day, it clearly says the total cost is $15.1 million. We only authorize borrowing up to the balance of the 2.3, and if we don't receive, for any reason, the bonding money from the governor, we will not go forward. But we wouldn't even have to borrow the 2.3 if you decide to so designate $2.3 million from the ARA towards that, so you would have a brand new state-of-the-art regional public safety complex with the expenditure of no Enfield tax dollars. We upgraded the water pollution control facility. It's, again, state-of-the-art, will serve us for many decades to come. But as part of that, you need pump stations that are throughout town. Now, we've been doing pay-as-you-go and saving. We have 17 pump stations throughout town. Currently, we've saved $4 million that we have in the bank. The total cost to replace and repair the ones we have is probably $13 million. So what we've done, again, to be looking to spend from different areas. We have the $4 million. We're recommending that we would take from the American Recovery Fund. It's not fun, it's not sexy, but I think it's appropriate that we'll save impact to have to put it into our CIP and have an effect on our mill rate, almost $4 million for pump stations. And again, we'll come forward later. They range between $750,000 to $2.5 million to upgrade each one, and you can decide. Again, we'd come to you with each one of these for your consideration at the appropriate time. Lastly, premium pay. This is what the federal government has designated for frontline workers such as police, EMS, and public works, those who worked on the front lines during the COVID. So we've designated $750,000 in a fund that the council would determine the criteria. We would tell you who's eligible. You could determine the amount, and that would remunerate them for their courageous service during COVID. The last page, that's the total. We've been given $12.920,906. We've allocated $12.920,906. So we give this to you. We'll send it out. Food for thought. I think it's a good blueprint. Remember, we have to follow the rules. We'll find out what the final rules are from the government. But we've tried to address needs that otherwise we would have to pay through the tax rate system of the town. So this saves basically our taxpayers $12.9 million over the next several years that we can use for other worthy projects that the council deems appropriate in upcoming budgets. So We wanted to be prudent. We wanted to help businesses that were distressed, reward workers who saved us and worked for us during it, but also invest in infrastructure that's real, that would save decades of future taxpayers from having to subsidize these programs by the budget process alone. So it's for your consideration. We'll talk about it, I expect, in November. We'll bring it back up, perhaps have a workshop. And then if you give it your blessing, as each phase comes forward, we'll come before you. It can be discussed in more detail, and then make the appropriations through finance. Thank you.